And finally, new rule: Democrats have to stop talking about packing the Supreme Court because it's already packed with Catholics. Roberts, Thomas, Alito, Kavanaugh, Sotomayor, and Gorsuch, who I count as Catholic because he was raised Catholic and is now Episcopalian, which is just a Catholic who flunked Latin. And once Mitch McConnell and company are done FedExing Amy Coney Barrett to the bench, 7 of the 9 justices will be Catholic. And look, I have nothing against Catholics except my entire upbringing, but they are only 20% of the population. If 7 out of 9 justices were Jews or Muslims or Buddhists, would that be okay? And if faith is this super important element of life, as Barrett and her Republican supporters say it is, shouldn't we have a healthier balance on our highest court? In 2006, Barrett told a graduating class of law students, "Keep in mind that your legal career is but a means to an end. That end is building the kingdom of God." No, it's not. That's not the point of a legal career. And you pundits earnestly debating whether she will vote to overturn Roe versus Wade, of course she will. She's been groomed since birth to overturn Roe versus Wade. She's like the Terminator, a robot programmed to fulfill one task. Except she wasn't sent from the future, she was sent from the past. Because here's the truth about Catholics in America. There's 2 types: scary and not scary. The vast majority, not scary, not doctrinaire. In fact, they're famous for ignoring everything the Pope tells them not to do. They divorce, they use contraception, they have premarital sex, they have anal sex, sometimes all in one night.
Hollywood is run by Jews. It's owned by Jews. And they should have a greater sensitivity about the issue of people who are suffering.
Is Brando right? We know that the original movie moguls were mostly Jewish, but since the conglomerates now own the studios, is Hollywood still run by Jews? Abraham Foxman, former national director of the Anti-Defamation League, addressed this question vis-a-vis Mr. Brando's comments.
It was shocking to hear Marlon Brando, an acclaimed actor and champion of civil rights, invoke an anti-Semitic canard that Hollywood is run by Jews. Mr. Brando should know that what he said is utterly false. Hollywood studios are owned and movies are made by men and women, some of whom are Jewish, many of whom are not. Those Jews who entered the movie industry have done so as individuals, not as representatives of their religious group or with an aim to act in some coordinated conspiratorial manner.
We agree with Abe Foxman. Jews in general do not run Hollywood. Thus, Jews in general should not be blamed for any sort of coordinated activities or conspiracies that the mainstream media may or may not be involved with.
Oh, I just wish my Jewish associates in the movie industry would, they come up to me all the time. They say, "Hey, James, I'm Jewish. How come I don't get a job running the studios? I put in my resume and they won't let me or Marvin Davis run anything in Hollywood." And remember, Marvin Davis was not only Jewish, he was a multi-billionaire.
Recall when insider Alan Ladd led the mass exodus from 20th Century Fox after Marvin Davis had acquired the studio. Yet even he, a multi-billionaire, could not get in to run Hollywood any more than any other outsider, whether Jewish or Gentile.
So Abe is right. Jews in general do not run Hollywood.
These things acknowledged, along comes Ben Stein in E! magazine.
First, it is extremely clear to anyone in Hollywood that Jews are, so to speak, in charge in Hollywood in a way that is not duplicated in any other large business.
It's not fair to say that Hollywood is run by Jews, Jews in general. That's not a fair statement, and I think my studies show that, and that's misleading. And so people who talk about conspiracies or suggest that all Jews are somehow involved in the film industry is not true. There's a lot of Jews all over the world that have no interest whatsoever in what goes on in Hollywood.
So what's the reality? Ever since Neil Gabler, who happens to be Jewish, wrote a book entitled An Empire of Their Own, How the Jews Invented Hollywood, it's been common knowledge that Hollywood was established and run by Jewish movie moguls.
When you look at the leadership of Hollywood, the management, the top-level executives, we recognize that the Jewish elite no more represent the rank-and-file Jewish people than the political elite represent the rank-and-file American voting public.
But some will ask, given Hollywood was established over 100 years ago, how could it still be run by Jews?
You still don't get it, do you, boys? There ain't no countries anymore. No more good guys. They're running the whole show. They own everything, the whole goddamn planet. They can do whatever they want.
Most of the Hollywood moguls, original Hollywood moguls, were of Jewish heritage, were Jews. And today, about 70% of the control positions, of the power positions in Hollywood are still maintained by these politically liberal, not very religious Jewish males of European heritage. So that's over 115 years or so of continuous and constant control of a very important communications medium by a very narrowly defined group. And my contention is that that's impossible without massive discrimination.
Of the total U.S. population of about 230 million, only about 6,800,000 are Jewish Americans. Thus, Jews represent about 2% of the population. One would therefore expect that only about 2% of the positions in top management of the studios, networks, and conglomerates would thus be held by men and women, some of whom are Jewish, as Abe Foxman put it. Nevertheless, this does not seem to be the case, according to Michael Medved, who observed in the 1996 August edition of Moment magazine the following.
It makes no sense at all to try to deny the reality of Jewish power and prominence in popular culture. Any list of the most influential production executives at each of the major movie studios will produce a heavy majority of recognizably Jewish names.
Hollywood is predominantly run by the Jewish community, and they are the lords of Hollywood for the most part, and they yield a lot of power. And God forbid you should buck that power or in any way say anything from the other point of view, you will immediately be labeled as being anti-Semitic and not part of the crowd, the in crowd. And that's just the way it is.
And then Joel Stein, writing in a December 2008 issue of LA Times, elaborates.
Joel Stein, as a proud Jew, I want America to know that of our accomplishment. Yes, we control Hollywood. Without us, you'd be flipping between the 700 Club and Davy and Goliath on TV all day.
So Neil Gabler says Jews invented Hollywood. Michael Medved says they are a heavy majority. Ben Stein says Jews are in charge. And Joel Stein says they control Hollywood. At least 4 prominent individuals from the Jewish community say, in essence, that Hollywood is run by Jews, just as Marlon Brando stated in 1996.
Hollywood is run by Jews. It's owned by Jews.
If it's true, it would mean that those Jews run Hollywood. It doesn't mean that all Jews run Hollywood. And it doesn't mean that the ones who do run Hollywood are doing so as Jews.
So, Jews in general do not run Hollywood. However, about 60 to 70, 80% of the top executive positions in the studios are dominated by Jewish males.
Then along comes Seth MacFarlane, hosting the 2013 Oscars, and Gary Oldman in a 2014 magazine interview, both Gentiles.
Mel Gibson is in a town that's run by Jews, and he said the wrong thing.
You guys have made some beautiful, some inspiring movies. I made Ted. What about you? You got a Berg on the end of your name. Are you Jewish?
Am I Jewish? No, actually, I'm Catholic.
Wrong answer. Try again.
What?
Look, you want to work in this town, or don't you?
After hearing these comments from MacFarlane and Oldman, Abe Foxman and Rabbi Marvin Heyer of the Simon Wiesenthal Center took immediate action.
Every comedian is entitled to wide latitude, but no one should get a free pass for helping to promote anti-Semitism.
What he did at the Oscars was offensive and not remotely funny. It only reinforces stereotypes which legitimize anti-Semitism.
I do not think it is anti-Semitic to simply observe the facts as they exist in reality and report them accurately. Most people seem to be afraid to state the truth and sort of dance around and do the PC thing or whatever. And so I'm simply trying to state the truth, and which are supported by the facts.
Anytime one wants to thwart investigation into some area, the race card is brought out, and the apologists of Hollywood use the cry of anti-Semitism anytime someone wants to reform Hollywood or investigate its business practices. Is this really acceptable in a democratic society where the free flow of information is vital?
When Neil Gabler, Ben Stein, Michael Medved, and Joel Stein, all Jewish, say Hollywood is run by Jews, they get a pass from organizations ostensibly representing the Jewish community. Yet, when major stars like Marlon Brando, Mel Gibson, Gary Oldman, and Seth MacFarlane, all non-Jews, even joke that Hollywood is run by Jews, they're reprimanded. Is this fair?
But again, that's all that we can do. The person who takes this request is not here.
It seems that Neil Gabler, Michael Medved, Ben Stein, Joel Stein, and Marlon Brando are right. But if Jews enter the movie industry only as individuals, not as representatives of the religion or of the Jewish community, as Abe Foxman says, why do organizations that seem to represent the Jewish community, such as the ADL and Simon Wiesenthal, attack individuals who are simply expressing their opinion about who runs Hollywood?
Yeah, the ADL and similar organizations who seem to take it upon themselves to demonize, vilify, and even destroy anyone who dares to make an objective, much less critical analysis of anything Jewish, I think demonstrates a tremendous bigotry and bias. I mean, this is supposed to be a country in which free speech is not only tolerated, but encouraged. The idea that we all must think the same thing and we all must say the same thing is not consistent with American history and American liberty. Our country was founded and framed on the idea of contrary thought and public debate, taking ideas into the marketplace. That's been the American tradition. And so now, over the last few decades, all of that is out the window. If you say anything contrary to whatever the accepted philosophy is at the moment, then you are worthy of disgrace.
In a democratic society where freedom of speech is guaranteed by the First Amendment, should acclaimed actors, or anyone, have to cry and weep before the Hollywood Control Group and its magistrates for stating what anyone can observe or confirm on the Internet?
A couple of years ago, I released the film Passion. Now, even before anyone saw a frame of film, for an entire year, I was subjected to a pretty brutal sort of public beating. And during the course of that, I think I probably had my rights violated in many different ways as an American, you know, as an artist, as a Christian, just as a human being.
4 out of 6 CEOs at the major studios, 5 out of 6 CEOs at the networks, and 4 out of 6 CEOs at the conglomerates are Jewish. Simple math tells us that if 60% of the 54 CEOs in the control group are individuals who happen to be Jewish, a small group of Jewish males not only runs Hollywood, they run the New York networks and the conglomerates. They, in essence, run the entire mainstream media.
When Abe Foxman said that Hollywood is represented, many of them Jewish, he wasn't exactly being truthful. So really, he's putting the Jewish community at risk when he falsifies the number of Jewish studio executives that actually are influencing the selection of motion pictures in the movie industry.
Not only that, a small group of politically liberal, not very religious Jewish males of European heritage has run the Hollywood studios for over 100 years.
My argument is it is not appropriate for any narrowly defined group, don't care who it is, to control an important communications medium like the motion picture. If you had a group of Southern Baptists running Hollywood, or a group of African Americans, a group of Native Americans, we'd be seeing different kinds of films. There's no question about that, because again, movies tend to mirror the values, interests, cultural perspectives, and prejudices of their makers. So that really then tends to be sort of private propaganda, private censorship being employed.
Even though these are the facts, it is important to remember the distinction articulated by Abe Foxman that Jews enter the movie industry only as individuals and not as representatives of their religion or the Jewish community.
But the minute you have someone like Abe Foxman saying that Jews don't operate in any kind of concerted manner, yet you have an organization that represents Jews in general, such as the ADL, chastising somebody like Marlon Brando, you in essence do have Jews in general influencing at least the knowledge and perception of Hollywood. So you're invoking the Jewish community. Anytime you represent the Jewish community in something like the ADL or the Simon Wiesenthal Center, you're basically making Jews in general look like apologists for the Hollywood movie industry. And if the Hollywood movie industry is using predatory practices or discrimination to stay in power, a lot of people are going to blame the Jewish community for this.
Those Jews who entered the movie industry have done so as individuals.
But even as individuals, there are implications. For if movies mirror their makers, as we previously covered, the implications are well stated by Michael Medved.
The combined weight of so many Jews in one of America's most lucrative and important industries gives the Jews of Hollywood a great deal of political power. They are a major source of money for Democratic candidates.
Is this not almost exactly what Ben Bagdikian, the Supreme Court, and John Cones are saying? Media power is political power, and movies are an important communications channel that mirrors the interests, values, cultural perspectives, and prejudices of their makers.
I think it's self-evidently true, as John Combs said, that the makers of movies are going to reflect their own interests, values, prejudices, and convictions, if you will. It's obvious that's the way most people operate in general. You're certainly not going to produce a movie that reflects someone else's values that are antagonistic to yours. So the mainstream media promotes the globalist agenda, number one, because they believe in the globalist agenda, the control group. But I think number two, indirectly, to the extent that they promote ideas that are subversive of popular power, popular sovereignty, local control. The consequence of that is to aid globalist machinations.
Pennsylvania goes to Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the President of the United States.
Everybody is crying.
And since most Jews are Democrats and most Democrats are liberal, would this not explain why we have a liberal media?
You're awake, by the way.
How do we explain how this is possible?
This was a white lash.
The only checks and balances we have are us, the view.
And some media that calls for such things as the endless infringement of the Second Amendment with all manner of regulations.
Do you think it's time to take a look at assault weapons and discuss possibilities of changing laws pertaining to them?
So, given these things, we come back to the question of Israel. How many of the top executives in the networks and studios are prejudiced in favor of Israel? In short, how many executives in the mainstream media control group are Zionists?
There is another reason the media is liberal. Movies are creations of art. And when you're making a fantasy or a creation of art, you're always trying to push the limits, okay? So by the very nature of art, by the very nature of movies, they're going to be liberal. They're going to be progressive. You're going to progress into new areas. You're going to explore the fringes and the outer extremities of existence.
If 60% of the network, studio, and conglomerate CEOs are Jewish Zionists, this may be why anchors, pundits, politicians, and celebrities all tread carefully around the third rail of politics: Israel, the Jewish state.
The Jewish leadership in New York City media and in Hollywood is extensive, as we've already discussed. And would that be the reason why free thought is not allowed on the subject of Israel, whether it be on the talk shows, the newscasts, Hollywood itself? Yes, I think the answer is an emphatic and obvious yes. That's the reason.
The issue is whether we the people should be concerned when none of our political candidates can get coverage from the mainstream media unless they're uncritically pro-Israel. Many American voters and taxpayers do not feel the U.S. should be involved in Middle Eastern affairs as much as we are. Look at what our involvement has already done: caused wars, 3,500 American lives, 4,500 civilian lives from drone attacks.
And when you have a group of people, I don't care who it is, that refuse to allow another group of people the opportunity to even express themselves without the fear of the destruction of their way of life and their livelihood, is totally, totally foreign to anything this country was built upon.
$5 trillion in debt and taxes, the deaths of millions of indigenous people around the Middle East, the rise of ISIS, and worldwide threats of terror. Now even terrorist attacks on American soil.
I don't think every political candidate, or most political candidates, take a pro-Israel position, or at least say that they're pro-Israel, they're going to defend Israel, Israel is our greatest ally in the Middle East, or whatever. I don't think they all say that because there's Jewish influence on them. They say it because that's what those people in their constituencies believe. Of course, the media people, they're hired, and they don't have much of a chance because there's employment discrimination, in a sense, there, right? They're going to be hired by control group people who are favorable to Israel, and therefore they need to be favorable to Israel, and they'll get the job.
If the control group were comprised of fewer Zionists and more Arabs or Muslims, would coverage of Israel be more balanced? Would the U.S. military be stationed all over the Middle East?
Unfortunately, because of the stranglehold over the entertainment industry, over the news industry, the New York media, and the Hollywood industry itself, it's almost impossible for people who have differing opinion to be freely able to express it. That is the problem. That's one of the major problems in the mainstream media today.
If a candidate is vilified by the mainstream media for taking a stand that is not politically correct, is it okay that the candidate will probably be ostracized, hence never get elected?
And Congressman Ron Paul is with us tonight. It's an honor to have you, sir. You're a leader of a movement. Sometimes you remind me of my hero growing up, who was in fact Barry Goldwater.
Oh,
and then I grew up.
The problem is the lack of diversity, not the fact that they're Jewish, or the fact that they're liberal, or the fact that they're males. None of the factors in the demographic are the problem. It's the problem of all of the factors aligning in a combination that locks the control group into a certain pattern of thought, a certain pattern of interests, cultural values, beliefs, and prejudices.
This idea that government will take care of me, that means that somebody will. Doesn't the person have to take responsibility and buy health insurance?
What would be the reaction of many people in Hollywood today if all of a sudden we said, 60% of the upper management in Hollywood and the top level executives were, let's say, Muslims? What would be the reaction to that?
There's a revolution going on, Chris.
Until we allow people to be free, to be able to express themselves, their talents, their abilities, their thought, their philosophies in a free and open debate, until we have that, let's face it, we're in an oppressed society.